The following program shows you how to operate the Grass Valley Group DPM-100 digital picture manipulator. As an operator, this videotape will give you a quick and easy way to learn how to use this powerful digital effects system. As you watch the tape, we'll step you through all of the basic functions of the DPM-100, giving you the closest possible feeling to an actual hands-on experience. As an extra help, you can also use the tutorial section of the operator's handbook, which closely follows this presentation. A pre-programmed disc included with the tutorial lets you set up your DPM-100 correctly for each step. You'll quickly discover all the creative capacity that Grass Valley Group has packed into this powerful and intuitive digital picture manipulator. The program has been divided into two main sections: one, transform operations, and two, keyframe effects. Transforms are those operations which change the position, size, or shape of pictures. Keyframe effects are simply a group of pictures in sequence. These two main sections have been further reduced to numbered segments or lessons. For your convenience, the corresponding number of each segment will appear in the upper left-hand corner of the screen as a handy index. This will enable you to shuttle the tape to the specific segment of the program you're most interested in viewing. The numbered segments are listed for your reference on the video cassette case that this tape was shipped in and are arranged as follows. Under transform operations, there are 1, sizing or squeezing a picture, 2, locating or positioning a picture, 3, spinning or rotating a picture, 4, orbiting, 5, flipping and tumbling, 6, skewing or slanting a picture, 7, aspect adjustment, 8, trimming X, Y, and Z values, and 9, detent values. Keyframe effects continue with number 10, creating a keyframe effect, 11, learning or saving your effect into an eMem effects memory register, 12, running and reviewing keyframe effects, 13, changing the keyframe duration time, 14, inserting or adding a keyframe into an effect, 15, deleting a keyframe from an effect, 16, replacing a keyframe in the effect, 17, editing using the effect menu to edit effects, and 18, creating keyframe effects using the global path control. Looking at the number of lessons we'll be exploring, it's easy to imagine all the creative power that's at your fingertips with the DPM-100. Power that's easily harnessed through its control panel. The control panel is divided into logical sub-panels to make operations intuitive and easy to master. They include the transform control and joystick that are used to size and move pictures, the keyframe area that combines picture movements into keyframe effects, transition control, where transitions can be run manually or automatically, eMem effects memory, where effect sequences you've created can be stored and later recalled with a touch of a button, the direct entry keypad for directly entering numerical values for picture setup and manipulation, the delegation push buttons, which delegate the control panel to Channel 1, Channel 2, or global functions. Output controls the output of either Channel 1, Channel 2, or their combination. Make note that the second channel with the combiner is an option of the DPM-100. Each channel has an A input and a B input. With this particular program, we'll be using just one channel. Channel 1 input A will be butterfly footage, and Channel 1 input B will be aerial footage. The addition of a keyer section in the DPM-100 allows keying without the use of a switcher. The last sub-panel of the DPM-100 is the Streamline Effects Controller. The Streamline system allows access to all advanced effects. Creating these advanced effects will be covered in detail in a subsequent videotape program. With this brief tour of the control panel, we're ready to begin our operational overview of the DPM-100. Unless otherwise noted, the picture shown as an inset on your screen is the program output of the DPM-100 we're operating. Manipulated images are shown against an internally generated matte signal. The matte color defaults to black. The color of the matte can be adjusted by using the Streamline menu. Remember that if at any time you feel confused about the information being presented, you can review a particular part of the program by rewinding this tape using the numbered index to find the appropriate program segments. You can also refer to the lessons in the DPM-100 Operator's Handbook that have been designed to correspond to the segments of this program. Starting from a known state at power-up, we can begin operations. To transform the size of a picture, first select Locate Size on the Transform section of the panel. Now, for most of your transform functions, you can also make adjustments via the Direct Entry keypad. The joystick and the keypad are used to adjust X, Y, and Z relationships. Moving the joystick left-right affects the X-axis. Moving the joystick forward-back affects the Y-axis. Turning the joystick adjusts the Z value. Clockwise makes the picture larger. Counterclockwise makes the picture smaller. You can adjust a picture from 100 times its original size down to 0%. You can also adjust the picture size using the Direct Entry section of the panel. Press Z and then enter a value on the keypad of from 0 to 100 and press Enter. Any value between 0 and 1 makes the picture smaller. For example, 0.45 will be 45% of the original size. A value between 1 and 100 makes the picture larger. For example, 12 will be 12 times larger than the original picture. A value of 1 leaves the picture at its original full screen size. The Z push button will light when it's selected and will stay selected until you delegate the keypad to a different function. The current Z value will be displayed above the keypad as long as Z is selected. This is true regardless of whether you use the keypad or the joystick to set the Z value. If you decide at any point that you do not want to enter the data you've keyed in, press Clear to erase it. The DPM-100 allows you to move a picture anywhere on the screen or to a position partially or completely off-screen. To locate a picture, here reduced by 0.45, select Locate Size or Locate Spin on the Transform section of the control panel. Use the joystick or Direct Entry keypad to position the picture. With the joystick, move the knob in the direction you want the picture to move. Left-right is the X-axis value. Forward-back is the Y-axis value. To position the picture using Direct Entry, select X or Y and enter a value using the keypad and press Enter. Using the screen grid, you can better see an object's location as defined by its position along the X and Y axes. The viewing screen is divided into a grid 8 units wide, the X-axis, by 6 units high, the Y-axis. Note that X values greater than plus or minus 4 and Y values greater than plus or minus 3 can move the center of the picture off-screen. To clear all transform values and return to a known state, press Clear Working Keyframe. This will return the picture to default values. The picture will be full-sized and centered unless the values have been changed. We'll be showing you how to set default values in a later tape on Streamline operations. The DPM-100 allows you to spin a picture around its own center and stop it at any angle. To spin or rotate a picture, select Locate Spin on the Transform section of the control panel. You can now spin the picture repeatedly around its own center using the joystick or the direct entry keypad. With the joystick, turn the knob in the direction of the spin. The amount you turn the knob controls the speed of the spinning, which will continue as long as you hold the knob in that position. Letting go of the knob stops the picture from spinning. If you want a large number of spins, it's easier to use the keypad entry method. Before entering spin values into your keypad, it might be good to briefly look at the operating philosophy behind spins. Spin values are entered as complete spins plus a percentage value, with a decimal point separating the two numbers. Positive values spin the picture in a clockwise direction. Negative values spin it in a counterclockwise direction. To enter a spin value, select Z. For this example, enter 2.75 and press Enter. The picture will spin clockwise 2 3/4 times. Note that when you use the keypad to enter values, the spins will not be visible as you enter them. You'll see only the ending position of the picture. This is because multiple spins are normally used as part of keyframe effects, so that a duration time can be set for them. The orbit function allows you to move the DPM-100 picture in a circle around a variable center. Let's look at how to perform an orbit in more detail. First, select Orbit in the Transform section. Now we'll need to turn on the center of orbit cursor so that we'll have a visible indicator to position the center of orbit. To turn on the cursor, make sure Channel 1 is selected in the Delegation section. In the Streamline Effects Controller section of the panel, hold down the Home Exit push button until the Home menu appears. Press the More push button until Effect appears as a menu selection. Press the push button under Effect, then press the push button under Cursor until the word Cursor appears in all capital letters, indicating that it is selected. A plus cursor will appear on your monitor screen, marking the center of orbit for Channel 1. If the cursor is not visible, press X, 0, Enter, and Y, 0, Enter to recenter it. Now you can use the joystick to position the orbit center. Left-right is the X-axis value, and forward-back is the Y-axis value. You will normally have the cursor on whenever you set up an orbit. However, it will not be stored with the orbit in a keyframe effect. This is so that you can turn the cursor off and remove it from the screen when you're ready to produce your final output. There are basically 3 steps involved in an orbit. 1. Position the center of orbit anywhere on the X and Y axis, including off-screen. 2. Position the center of the picture. The radius of the orbit will be the distance between the center of the picture and the center of the orbit. 3. Perform the orbit. You can also use direct entry to position your center of orbit. Select X or Y, enter a specific value on the keypad, and press Enter. Note that X values greater than plus or minus 4 and Y values greater than plus or minus 3 will move the center of orbit off-screen. Remember that the distance between the center of the picture and the center of orbit will establish the radius of the orbit. Turn the joystick in the direction you want the picture to orbit. The amount you turn the knob controls the speed of orbiting, which continues as long as you hold the joystick in that position. When you let go of the knob, the picture stops orbiting. Now let's use the direct entry keypad to define our orbit. Orbit values are entered as complete orbits, plus a percentage value of an orbit, with a decimal point separating the two numbers. Positive values orbit the picture in a clockwise direction. Negative values orbit it in a counterclockwise direction. To enter an orbit value, select Z. For this example, enter minus 2.75 and press Enter. The picture will orbit counterclockwise 2 3/4 times. Orbits are not visible when you enter them with the keypad. You only see the ending position of the picture. Like spins, orbits are normally used as part of keyframe effects, where a duration time can be set for them. In fact, it's possible to store spins and orbits and other manipulations all at the same time to create intricate and striking effects. So far in this program, we've worked only with the butterfly footage coming from input A. The DPM-100 second input, input B, functions identically. Input B is aerial footage. When performing flips and tumbles, you can use both inputs at the same time. The DPM-100 picture has both a front and a back side, and both sides are revealed during flipping and tumbling operations. You can select either the same input or two different inputs for the front and back. In our example, input A is the front of the picture and input B is the back. Each time the picture flips or tumbles, the opposite video is revealed. The picture will normally be reversed on the back side of a flip or tumble. It's possible to defeat reversals using the Streamline menu. To flip or tumble a picture, select Flip Tumble in the Transform section of the control panel. Let's assign input A to the front of the picture and input B to the back. The sequence is select Flip Tumble, press X, key in 0, and press Enter. Then press Y, key in 0, and press Enter. This ensures that the front of the picture is revealed. Select input A to be the front by pressing the A push button in the input section of the control panel. Now select Flip Tumble. Press X, key in 0.5, and press Enter. Then press Y, key in 0, and press Enter. This ensures that the back of the picture is revealed. Select input B to be the back by pressing the B push button in the input section. There are two ways you can flip or tumble a picture, using the joystick or the direct entry keypad. Move the joystick left or right for a flip, or forward and back for a tumble. The amount you move the knob controls the speed of compression. The picture will stop moving at the point you let go of the knob. To use direct entry, select X for flips or Y for tumbles. Flips are entered as complete 360-degree turnarounds, plus a percentage value for partial turns. A decimal point separates the two numbers. Positive values flip the picture in a clockwise direction. Negative values flip it in a counterclockwise direction. If the number you enter is not a whole number, the picture will end up partially flipped when the transform is completed. Now select X. Use the direct entry keypad to enter minus 2.12. The picture will flip twice and then stop when it is 1/8 of the way through the next flip. As with spins and orbits, flips are not visible when they're entered using the keypad. Flipping two different input pictures where the front picture is different from the back looks like this. Flipping a single input picture around its y-axis is shown here. The front and back of the picture are identical, not reversed. The last example shows flipping and reversing two different pictures with the back picture reversed. Tumbling a picture is the same as flipping a picture, except that you move the joystick forward back. If you're going to use direct entry for a tumble, use the keypad to assign a Y value. Note that you can also flip and tumble a picture at the same time by moving the joystick diagonally. With skew aspect selected, you can transform the DPM-100 picture by changing its angle of slant along horizontal and/or vertical axes. As you can see, skewing the picture helps with the illusion of 3D and motion. There are two ways to skew the picture: using the joystick or with the direct entry keypad. Move the joystick in the direction you want to move the top or right side of the picture. Left-right adjusts the x-axis value and moves the top of the picture left or right, while the bottom of the picture moves in the opposite direction. Forward-back controls the y-axis value and moves the right side of the picture up or down, while the left side of the picture moves in the opposite direction. In either case, the center of the picture will stay in the same place. Using direct entry, select X or Y and enter a value on the keypad and press Enter. Skew values will normally be between -10 and +10. Positive X values move the top of the picture to the right. Negative X values move the top of the picture to the left. Positive Y values move the right side up. Negative Y values move the right side down. Note that when skew values are very large, the picture will simply become a vertical or horizontal line and will eventually disappear entirely from the screen. With skew aspect selected on the transform panel, you can compress the horizontal and vertical size of a picture using the DPM-100. Note that you can only adjust one dimension of the picture at a time using the aspect adjustment. If you wish to change both the horizontal and vertical dimensions, use the size adjustment to change one of them. As usual, there are two ways to adjust the aspect of the picture: with the joystick or the direct entry keypad. Using the joystick, turn the knob clockwise or counterclockwise. This will adjust the horizontal and vertical aspect of the picture in turn. Letting go of the knob stops the picture moving at that point. Using direct entry, select Z and enter a value on the keypad, and press Enter. The picture aspect will be adjusted according to the value keyed in. If the value is greater than 0 but less than 1, the picture will be compressed along its x-axis and will not be inverted. If the value is greater than 1 up to 2, the picture will be compressed along its x-axis and will be inverted. If the value entered is less than 0 but greater than -1, the picture will be compressed along its y-axis and will not be inverted. If the value is less than -1 up to -2, the picture will be compressed along its x-axis and will be inverted. If the value is 0, the picture will not be compressed along either axis and will not be inverted. If the value entered is 1 or -1, the picture will be so highly compressed that it will disappear from the screen. You can use the direct entry keypad to add or subtract a specific amount from the current X, Y, and/or Z value of any transform. Let's select a picture location to demonstrate trimming. Select X, Y, or Z. The current value will show in the direct entry display. Now key in the desired trim value, either positive or negative. Do not press Enter. Press Trim to add that value to the current number. You can use the detent function in the DPM-100 to quickly select from a limited number of fixed values rather than a continuous range. To demonstrate the detent function, select any transform function you wish to adjust. Select X, Y, or Z, and note the current value displayed. Now press detent on the direct entry keypad. The selected X, Y, or Z value will be changed to the nearest detent value. For example, if you selected Locate Size and Z, and if Z equals 0.21, pressing detent would automatically change it to Z equals 0.25, the nearest detent value for size. As another example, when you're setting transform values such as spins, you can select any value in a continuous range. If you press detent, the selected transform value will snap to the nearest detent value. For spins, this will be 45 degrees. This concludes transform operations of the DPM-100, segments 1 through 9. The second main section of this program, Keyframe Effects Operations, follows next. A keyframe is a set of picture characteristics or parameters which define the picture at an instant in time. The parameters include size, location, shape, background, borders, and picture source, but do not include video data for the picture. That is, a keyframe defines a picture's parameters, but the picture itself will be whatever video source is on the selected input. Single keyframes can be linked to other keyframes, so they can be run in sequence automatically. A keyframe sequence is called an effect or keyframe effect. Using one channel, you can create a keyframe effect of up to 150 different keyframes. The way in which the parameters change between one keyframe and the next is computed by the DPM-100 according to the way you've programmed the effect. For example, a change in position could be linear or curved. The time it takes for one keyframe to change to the next is called the keyframe duration. It is set at a default rate of 30 frames, or about 1 second, but it can be changed. In this lesson, you'll create a simple keyframe effect. In following lessons, you'll learn how to run, review, edit, save, and recall keyframe effects. The general procedure for creating a keyframe effect is to first use the control panel to set up a keyframe in the working keyframe buffer. When you've completed each setup, you will insert a keyframe into the keyframe current effect space, which is your temporary storage buffer for the keyframe effects you create. For more permanent storage, you can save your effects into EMEM effects memory registers. Note that you'll need to make sure the current effect space is empty before you create your new effect. 1. In the Delegation section, select Channel 1. 2. In the Keyframe section, press the Delete push button repeatedly until the keyframe display is blank. 3. Delegate the panel to Channel 2 and Global in turn, and repeat the deletion process. Note that for this part of the tutorial, Channel 1 in the delegation section of the panel is selected. We'll learn how to work with multiple keyframe paths in later lessons. Use the control panel to set up the effect you want as your first keyframe. This is your working keyframe. For this example, let's use Locate Size. Press Insert After to save your setup in the current effect space as keyframe number 1. The number 1 will appear in the keyframe display to show that keyframe number 1 has been entered into the current effect space. For keyframe number 2, change the picture in the working keyframe buffer by skewing and relocating it using Skew Aspect and Locate Size. Now press Insert After. This will insert the working keyframe into the current effect space as keyframe number 2. For keyframe number 3, change the working keyframe by spinning the picture clockwise and relocating it using Locate Spin. Press Insert After to insert the working keyframe into the current effect space. For keyframe number 4, change the working keyframe by making the picture larger and relocating it. Use Locate Size and then press Insert After. To see the keyframe effect you've created, go to the Transition section, rewind the effect, and press Run. The entire effect will run automatically beginning with the first keyframe. Notice that the spin effect you programmed into keyframe number 3 affects the motion path of the entire keyframe effect. That is, there is some spinning between keyframes number 1 and number 2, and between number 3 and number 4. This is because the DPM-100 uses a smooth path function as its default to shape the motion path. The smooth function averages the effects over the entire motion path. You'll learn how to select different path functions in following lessons. Once you've created a keyframe effect, you can save it into an EMEM effects memory register. A save operation, called a learn, memorizes an entire keyframe effect, including all transformations and motion programming, and saves it for future recall. A learn operation memorizes which input is selected for the effect, but does not memorize the actual picture data. To synchronize an effect with a particular picture, you'll need to use an editor. There are 99 different EMEM registers, 01 to 99, available for storage. Register number 00 is not available for storage. This register is always empty, so you can recall it to automatically clear the keyframe current effect space when you want to create a new keyframe effect. The left digit in the EMEM display tells which bank you're currently using. The 10 banks are numbered from 0 through 9. The right digit shows the register number you've selected. The 10 registers are also numbered from 0 through 9. To learn the keyframe current effect into memory, first press one or more of the Learn push buttons. For this tutorial, select Learn Channel 1. Remember that when you learn an effect into an EMEM register, any data currently stored in that register will be erased. Select the bank you want to use for storage by pressing the Bank push button, and then press the desired number 0 through 9. The number will appear as the left digit in the display. Do not use register 00. This register is always empty so that you can recall it to clear the current effect space. Perform the Learn operation by pressing the number of the register you want to use for storage. This number will appear as the right digit in the EMEM effects memory display. The effect will now be stored in that register. Now let's undo a learn. As we mentioned before, when you perform a learn, any data which was previously stored in the register you use will be erased. However, this data is temporarily stored in a special buffer. You can undo the learn as long as you've not performed another learn or a recall to current effect operation since the original learn. Press Last X. The data which was erased will be returned to the register, just as it was before you performed the learn. To recall the effect from EMEM effects memory storage back to the keyframe current effect space, select Recall to Current Effect. Now, select one or more of the recall push buttons. For this tutorial, select Recall Channel 1. Select the bank you used for storage by pressing the bank push button and the correct number of the bank where the effect is stored. Perform the recall operation by pressing the number of the register the effect is stored in. This number will appear as the right digit in the EMEM display. The keyframe effect stored in the selected register will be placed into the current effect space, where it can be reviewed or edited. The effect is also still available in the EMEM register. The effect is not erased when it is recalled. To undo a recall to the current effect space, press Last X. The data, which was erased during the recall, will be returned to the current effect space, just as it was before you performed the recall. Now, let's run a learned effect. To run a keyframe effect, which is stored in the EMEM register, without recalling it into the keyframe current effect space, first make sure that the Recall to Current Effect push button is not lighted. Then select one or more of the recall push buttons. For this example, select Recall Channel 1. Select the correct bank and bank number where the effect is stored. The correct number appears as the left digit of the display. Press the number of the register the effect is learned in. The effect will immediately run from its beginning. After you have stored a keyframe effect in an EMEM register, you can run it by simply recalling the register while the Recall to Current Effect push button is turned off. However, if you turn the Recall to Current Effect push button on and recall the effect to the keyframe current effect space, you have many more options. You can move through the effect in various ways, depending upon whether you want to see the entire effect or whether you want to review only a part of it. You can run it backwards. And you can edit it. The simplest way to view an entire keyframe when it's in the current effect space is to rewind and run it. You can run it using the Run push button or the lever as follows. First, make sure Stop Next and Reverse are off. Press Rewind. This cues up the first keyframe in the effect so that it's ready to run from the beginning. Next, press Run. The effect will begin immediately and will continue through the last frame automatically. To pause the sequence at any point, press Run again. Select Effect on the Transition Control Panel. Press Rewind, then move the lever from one limit to the other. The keyframe effect will run from its beginning to its end and then stop. Now move the lever arm and vary the speed and direction of the movement. As you vary the speed of the lever movement, the keyframe effect will run faster or slower. When you change the direction of lever movement, the effect will run in the opposite direction. However, no matter how much you vary the speed and direction, one complete movement of the lever from limit to limit always produces one complete run of the effect, as long as Stop Next is off. There are two ways to step through an effect one keyframe at a time. In the Transition section of the control panel, select Stop Next. When Stop Next is selected, the effect will run to the next keyframe and stop there, each time you either press Run or move the lever from one limit to the other. To get out of the Stop Next mode, press the push button a second time. There's also another way to step through an effect one keyframe at a time. In the Keyframe section of the panel, press Previous to return to the previous keyframe in the effect. Press Next to advance to the next keyframe in the effect. You can start to step through the effect from any point along the effect path, either at or between keyframes. Note that if you want to start from the first keyframe in the effect, press Rewind. To start from a specific keyframe, press Go to Keyframe, then the number of the keyframe, then Enter. Selecting the Reverse push button puts you into reverse mode and allows you to move through your keyframe effect backwards. Reverse effects Rewind, Run, the lever arm, and Stop Next. In reverse mode, pressing Rewind takes you to the last keyframe of the effect and stops there. Pressing Run runs the effect backwards from the point where you pressed Run to the beginning of the effect. Moving the lever arm runs the effect backwards. Pressing Stop Next causes the effect to move backwards to the previous keyframe and stops there each time you either press Run or move the lever from one limit to the other. A keyframe's duration is the time it takes to get to the next keyframe. The default duration time is 60 fields or 1 second. You can change keyframe duration times individually to be any length from 1 frame to one less than 100 million frames. You can also change the overall duration of a keyframe effect. To change an individual keyframe's duration, first select the keyframe you want to change by pressing Go to Keyframe, then the number of the keyframe, then Enter. Press Keyframe Duration. The direct entry display will show the current duration time for the selected keyframe. The keyframe display will show which keyframe is selected. Use the numbered keypad to enter a new time. You can enter either the number of frames directly or the number of seconds, a decimal, and the number of additional frames. Press Enter to confirm and Replace to change the duration time. To change the duration of an entire keyframe effect, press Effect Duration. The direct entry display will show the current duration time for the keyframe effect in the current effect space. Use the numbered keypad to enter a new time. Enter the number of frames directly or the number of seconds, a decimal, and the number of additional frames. Press Enter to confirm the time. The individual duration times for each keyframe will be adjusted in proportion to the overall adjustment for the effect. For example, if the duration for the entire effect is doubled, each individual keyframe duration will be doubled. With the DPM-100, you can insert a new keyframe either before, in between, or after any other keyframe in an effect sequence. Before doing so, you must recall the effect to the keyframe current effect space. Then go to any one of the existing keyframes in the current effect. All editing changes take place in the working keyframe buffer and are then inserted into the current effect. For this example, select keyframe number 2 by pressing Go to Keyframe, then 2, then Enter in the Direct Entry section of the control panel. You can use the Direct Entry or Transform sections of the control panel to change the keyframe parameters in the working keyframe buffer. You can also press Clear Working Keyframe to set all the parameters back to a known state, which you can program yourself. As you work, your new keyframe will be temporarily stored in the working keyframe buffer. you can restore the cleared keyframe data to the working keyframe buffer exactly as it was before by pressing Restore Working Keyframe. Now decide whether you want to insert the new keyframe into the current effect before or after the keyframe you've selected. To insert before, press Insert Before, and the new keyframe will be inserted before the selected one. For example, if you selected keyframe number 2, the new keyframe will be inserted as keyframe number 2, and the original number 2 becomes number 3. All following keyframes will be numbered one digit higher than they were before. To insert after, press Insert After, and the new keyframe will be inserted after the selected one. For example, if you selected keyframe number 2, the new keyframe will be inserted as keyframe number 3. All following keyframes will be numbered one digit higher than they were before. The new keyframe will have a default keyframe duration of 1 second. This will add 1 second to the overall duration of the keyframe effect. To run your revised current effect, press Rewind and Run. You can also insert a new keyframe at a point between two existing keyframes instead of before or after. The new keyframe will be inserted into the path between the two frames and will split the duration time which was originally between the two. Use the lever arm to move to the point where you want to insert the new keyframe. For this example, move to a point between keyframe number 2 and keyframe number 3. The status or parameters of the effect at this point will be temporarily stored in the working keyframe buffer. Press Insert After. The new keyframe will be inserted into the current keyframe effect at the point you selected. To run your revised current effect, press Rewind and Run. You can delete any keyframe from the current effect using the DPM-100. Keyframes before and after the deleted keyframe will link to form a new effect sequence. For example, if you delete keyframe number 3, the keyframe which was number 4 will become the new number 3. All following keyframes will be numbered one digit lower than they were before. Let's practice. Select the keyframe you want to delete. For this tutorial, use the Direct Entry section of the control panel to select keyframe number 3. Press Go to Keyframe. Then 3. Then Enter. Now press Delete, and the selected keyframe will be deleted from the current effect. Now let's see how we restore a deleted keyframe. A deleted keyframe is stored in memory until you perform another delete or a clear working keyframe. Until then, you can restore the deleted keyframe exactly as it was before by pressing Restore Working Keyframe and the appropriate Insert push button. For example, if you deleted keyframe number 3 and want to restore it, first go to keyframe number 2. Now press Restore Working Keyframe. This will place the deleted keyframe into the working keyframe buffer. Press Insert After to insert the keyframe into the current effect after keyframe number 2. You can also use the Delete Restore functions to move a keyframe to another place in the current effect. This is possible because when you delete a keyframe, it's placed into a special memory space. If you then move to another place in the effect, you can restore the deleted keyframe to the working keyframe buffer and insert it into the current effect in a new position. Go to the keyframe you want to move. For this lesson, go to keyframe number 3. Press Delete. Then move to keyframe number 1. Press Restore Working Keyframe to place the deleted keyframe in the working keyframe buffer. Press Insert After to enter the deleted keyframe into the current effect after keyframe number 1. The keyframe, which was originally number 3, will now be in the number 2 position. To replace a keyframe in the current effect with a new keyframe, first go to the keyframe you want to replace. For this tutorial, use the Direct Entry section of the control panel and select keyframe number 2. Press Go to Keyframe, then 2, then Enter. Use the control panel to set up a new keyframe picture on the working keyframe buffer. You can also press Clear Working Keyframe to set all of the working keyframe parameters back to a known state. Now press Replace, and the keyframe in the working keyframe buffer will replace the selected one. For example, if you selected keyframe number 2, the new keyframe will be inserted as keyframe number 2, and the original number 2 will be deleted from the current effect. It should be noted that when you replace a keyframe, that keyframe will be permanently erased. It is not stored in a buffer and cannot be restored. The Effect menu allows you to modify your keyframe effect by programming the way the picture changes and moves. A keyframe effect is basically a programmed motion path for a changing video picture. Only at key points along the path is the picture specifically defined in terms of parameters, such as size, location, shape, color, etc. These points are the keyframes. The value of the parameters between keyframes and the way in which the parameters change between one keyframe and the next is computed by the DPM-100. This process is called keyframe interpolation, or in-betweening. The DPM-100 lets you adjust in-betweening in a number of ways. The change between parameters can be instantaneous, linear, S-linear, or smooth. You can program size and aspect, location and center of rotation, and orbit and spin differently for each keyframe. You can adjust each keyframe separately, or adjust the entire current effect at once. If you have the optional second channel installed in your system, you can adjust in-betweening for each channel and for global parameter control separately. Now let's see how easy it is to use the Effect menu to edit effects by demonstrating its power in a step-by-step fashion. For this lesson, use Channel 1 only. Note that in order to perform this part of the tutorial, you must have a keyframe effect in the current effect space. If you don't, either create a new keyframe or recall one from an EMEM effects memory register. Now we can begin. First, select Channel 1 in the Delegation section of the control panel. To simplify editing, you can select which channels you want to see on the output. This allows you to monitor what is happening on one or two of the effects paths alone. You can disable the paths you don't want to see. You can disable Channel 1, Channel 2, Global, or any combination of the three. The Enables function does not affect the video seen on output. It only affects playback and keyframe editing. Use the Delegation section of the panel to select channels for editing. For this lesson, delegate Channel 1. Now press Effect to enter the keyframe effect editing program. Press Path. A new menu will appear which lets you select the parameters you want to edit. For this lesson, select Locate Center. This will allow you to edit the parameters for location and center of orbit. During this lesson, we'll experiment with different in-betweening formulas so you can see the wide variety of possible effects. The The formula you select determines the way the parameters change between keyframes. The change can be a hold, linear, S-linear, or smooth. When you first enter an effect, in-betweening is set to smooth as the default value. Once you've selected the parameter change formula, you can either apply it to a single keyframe or apply it to the entire effect. Go to keyframe number 2. Select Linear and press Replace. This will cause the location and center of orbit parameters to change in a linear fashion at keyframe number 2. Rewind and run your effect. Notice how the parameter change at keyframe number 2 differs from the change at other keyframes. With Linear still selected, press All Keyframes in the same menu. This will cause the location and center of orbit parameters to change in a linear fashion for every keyframe in the effect. Rewind and run your effect. Notice that as the effect approaches and leaves each keyframe position, there's an abrupt change in direction, almost as if the picture bounced at the keyframe point. Select S-linear and then press All Keyframes in the same menu. This will cause the location and center of orbit parameters to change in an S-linear fashion for every keyframe in the effect. Rewind and run your effect. Notice that S-linear in-betweening does not have the bounce effect that linear in-betweening has. Go to keyframe number 2. Select Hold and press Replace. This will cause the location and center of orbit parameters to change instantaneously at keyframe number 2. Rewind and run your effect. Notice how the instantaneous parameter change at keyframe number 2 differs from the S-linear change at other keyframes. If you're editing the location parameter, you can select Curve in addition to the other path shapes. Curve applies only to location. It controls the following 3 parameters: tension, continuity, and bias. These parameters interact with one another. When a value is entered for one, the effect it has will vary slightly according to the values set for the other 2 parameters. Tension is the characteristic of location which determines how sharply the curve bends at a keyframe position. For some effects, you may want to adjust the tension of the motion path and change the amount of curve at the keyframe position. To adjust tension, select Tension. The word tension will appear in the upper right-hand corner of the display to show that the streamlined soft knob is now delegated to this function. Turn the knob or use the keypad to adjust the tension. The tension value is shown in the direct entry display. A tension of 1 will produce a very tight curve, almost linear. A tension of -1 will produce a loose curve. A tension of +2 or greater will cause the curve to be so tight that it will begin to loop back around the keyframe position. When curve is selected, you can apply the curve tension to a single keyframe or to an entire keyframe effect. To apply the curve tension to a single keyframe, use Go to Keyframe to go to the desired keyframe, then press Replace. To apply it to an entire effect, press All Keyframe in the same menu. Continuity is the characteristic of location which determines whether the motion path continues smoothly without interruption. For some effects, such as animating a bouncing ball, for example, you may want to introduce a discontinuity in the motion at the point of impact. You do this by placing a keyframe at that point and adjusting its continuity. To adjust continuity, select Continuity. The abbreviated word will appear in the upper right-hand corner of the display to show that the streamlined soft knob is now delegated to this function. Turn the knob or use the keypad to adjust the continuity value. The current value will be displayed in the direct entry display. Go ahead and select Curve. Continuity value can now be applied to a single keyframe or to an entire keyframe effect. To apply it to a single keyframe, go to the keyframe and press Replace. To apply it to an entire effect, press All Keyframe in the same menu. Now let's turn our attention to bias. Bias is the characteristic of location which controls the direction of the motion path as it passes through a keyframe position. For some effect, you may want to change the direction of the motion path so that it overshoots or undershoots the keyframe position. To adjust bias, select it so that the word bias appears in the upper right-hand corner of the display. This shows that the Streamline Soft knob is now delegated to this function. Turn the knob or use the keypad to adjust the bias. The current value will be displayed in the direct entry display. Again, select Curve. You can now apply this bias value to a single keyframe or to an entire keyframe effect. To apply it to a single keyframe, go to the keyframe and press Replace. To apply it to an entire effect, press All Keyframe in the same menu. Now let's learn how we can modify all keyframes simultaneously. Modify All allows you to use the control panel to adjust all keyframes in an effect at the same time and in the same way. This function is useful, for example, when placing borders around every keyframe in an effect. Or if you wanted to relocate an entire effect by trimming all of the keyframes to the left. To use this function, select Modify from the Effect menu. Then select Modify All. If any keyframes are left in the current effect, the word All will appear in the keyframe display where a number would normally appear. This serves as a reminder that Mod All is still on. Now select Locate Size and X. Key in the value -0.5. Press Trim and then press Replace. When you press Replace, all the keyframes will move 0.5 screen units to the left, and Mod All will turn off automatically. So far in this program, we've built keyframe effects and performed transforms using the Channel 1 path and transform parameters. The DPM-100 also has a global path, which has its own set of transform parameters. Unlike Channel 1, the global path has no video inputs of its own. Global controls act upon the channel input pictures. Performing a global transform is the same as performing a channel transform, except that you select Global in the Panel Delegation section. The only exception is skew. You cannot perform skews using global parameters. To perform a global transform, turn on the Global Center of Orbit cursor as follows. First, select Global in the Delegation section of the control panel. Next, select Effect from the Streamline Home menu. Press the cursor push button until the word appears in capital letters in the display to indicate that it has been properly selected. A cursor symbol will appear on the monitor screen. This symbol marks the global center of orbit. Now select Orbit in the Transform section. Position the center of orbit by moving the joystick, or select X or Y, and enter a value using the direct entry keypad. Then press Enter. Once you've positioned the center of orbit, you may want to reposition the center of the picture. To do this, select Locate Size and use the joystick or keypad to change the X and or Y values. Remember that the distance between the center of the picture and the center of orbit will establish the radius of the orbit. Use the joystick or keypad to perform the orbit. Turn the joystick knob in the direction you want the picture to orbit. Note that the amount you turn the knob controls the speed of orbiting, which continues as long as you hold the knob in that position. Letting go of the knob stops the orbiting. It's important to remember that when you're performing an orbit, the picture may move off-screen. If it does move and you can't find it, select Locate Size. Then to bring the picture back on screen, press X, 0, Enter, and Y, 0, Enter. This will set the X and Y values of the location parameter to 0. Orbit values are entered as complete orbits plus a percentage of an orbit, with a decimal point separating the two numbers. Positive values orbit the picture in a clockwise direction. Negative values orbit it in a counterclockwise direction. To enter an orbit value, select Z. For this example, enter minus 7.25 and press Enter. The picture will orbit counterclockwise 7 1/4 times. Now let's create keyframe effects using the global control path. We can create more complex keyframe effects by using the global control path in our current effect. This path is separate from the channel 1 path, but the two paths are tied together in time. The global control path has no video inputs of its own. Instead, it acts upon the channel 1 video inputs. We can use this second set of parameters to create complex motion paths. For example, you could have two different centers of orbit for the picture to move around. The global control path also contains information for combiner transition states, fade to black operations, and optional recursive effects. If you have the second channel option, any global functions you perform will affect both channels in the same way. When you have more than one path in a current effect, you can choose whether to control one at a time or all of them together. You do this by selecting one path as your active path. The other path or paths can then be modify paths or inactive paths. The active path will be affected by any operations performed. Its status will be shown by the keyframe display and push buttons, just as if it were the only path in the current effect. Select Active Path by pressing the desired push button in the Delegation section of the control panel. A Modify path will be affected by any changes made in the active path. Its status will not be shown in the keyframe display or by the push buttons. Select paths for modifying by holding down the Active Path push button and pressing the desired Modify Path push buttons in the Delegation section. If a path is not selected for an active or modify state, it will not be affected by any changes made in the active path. Its status will not be shown in the keyframe display or by the push buttons. To simplify editing, you can temporarily disable one or more of the effect paths. When a path is disabled, the parameter changes programmed on that path would not change when running the current effect. For example, if channel 1 were disabled, its input picture would be visible on the DPM-100 outputs, but the picture would not change when running the current effect. For this lesson, let's enable channel 1 and global. Make sure the current effect space is empty before you create your new channel 1 global effect. With the current effect space empty, hold down channel 1 in the Delegation section and press Global. This selects channel 1 as the active path and global control as the modify path. Hold down Clear Working Keyframe for 1/2 second to clear both the channel 1 and global working keyframes and return the picture to its user default state. Press channel 1. This selects channel 1 as the active path so that we can build an effect using the channel 1 path only. Let's build an effect by inserting the picture into the current effect as keyframe number 1. Select Locate Spin and Z. Key in the number 7 for 7 complete spins and press Enter. Insert this state into the current effect as keyframe number 2. Now run the effect. The picture will spin in place 7 times. This is a channel 1 effect. All current effect paths are tied together in time. As you move through a current effect, you'll always be at the same point of time in all of the paths. The keyframe display shows the status of the active path. Now go to keyframe number 1 in the channel 1 path. The keyframe display will show 1. Press Global. This changes panel delegation and selects global control as the active path. Note that the keyframe display is now blank, since there are no keyframes in the global path. Turn on the Global Center of Orbit cursor using the Streamline menu. For this example, select Orbit and move the global cursor into the lower left-hand part of the screen. Enter this global state as keyframe number 1 of the global control path. Insert this picture into the current effect as keyframe number 1 of the global control path. The channel 1 path will not be changed. Now select Z. Key in the number 2 for 2 complete orbits and press Enter. Insert this state into the current effect as keyframe number 2 of the global path. Now run the effect. The picture will spin 7 times while it orbits twice around the global center of orbit. This is a channel 1 global effect. Now let's explore working with path modification. There are always at least 2 current effect paths, channels 1 and/or 2, and global. Their working keyframe buffers are separate, and the keyframes can therefore be edited separately or together, depending on panel delegation. However, all channels are always lined up with each other in terms of time. When you edit effects which use multiple channels, for instance, channel 1 and global, you have several editing choices. If you park on a given channel's keyframe and modify it, all editing functions are active. If 2 channels both have keyframes at exactly the same point in time, you can park at that point, delegate to both channels, and modify them both at the same time. Again, all editing functions are active. If there are no keyframes in either channel at a given point, only Insert After is active, as there are no existing keyframes to modify. If there is a keyframe at a given point for one channel, but no keyframe for the other channel at that particular point, you can delegate to both channels and make modifications to both channels. Note that only one editing function is active in this mode, Insert After. There is no keyframe in the other channel to modify. The result of this operation is that the keyframe that does exist will be modified or replaced. The other channel will have a keyframe inserted at that point. Now let's talk about the effect dissolve function. When you run an effect, it starts to run from its first keyframe. The effect dissolve function lets you delay the start so that you can change gradually to that keyframe over a period of time, instead of snapping to it abruptly. That is, instead of going immediately to the first keyframe of the effect, the DPM-100 will dissolve or change gradually from its existing state to the keyframe in a linear fashion, at whatever rate is set for the effect dissolve function. You can use the effect dissolve function whenever you run an effect, whether it's in the current effect space or stored in a register. To set the effect dissolve rate, select Effect from the Streamline Home menu. Press Dissolve and use the Streamline knob to set the rate in seconds. Note that an effect dissolve can be stored as a global function. That is, if the Learn Global push button is on when you learn a current effect, the current effect dissolve rate will be stored as part of the effect. Obviously, we presented a lot of information in this program about the basic operation of the Grass Valley Group DPM-100 digital picture manipulator. This videotape was designed so that you could review and practice those specific operations that you may want to master. Remember that the operator's handbook and a pre-programmed disc are also part of this learning package. Please note that another videotape program has also been produced on advanced effects that is available for those who want to get the very most out of their DPM-100.